protocol to receive. Obviously, same. So we have the Happy Model EP receiver. So we need to wire it up, as I mentioned. And this time we are going to update it via Wi-Fi. All right, so change my mind. Let's go back to the picture of the receiver. So I want to just show you a picture of the receiver. So I just need to find the receiver that we're using. Flight controller receiver, 0.44 gram, tiny, 2.4 gigahertz. Okay, so as I mentioned, we're using EP2. You need to connect the ground VCC, which will be plus 5 volts, transmit receive to your flight controller. Now, I'm going to assume that you have a brand new out of the box receiver, and we need to power it on, and there's many ways you can power it on. Let's go through the directions. Oops. So wire it up, update via Wi-Fi. So I just have to walk you through this. So you can power it on. If you have a 5-volt power supply, you can connect it to that. If you are already connected to the flight controller and you plug the battery into the flight controller will give you 5 volts. It will power it on. If you don't have the battery connected to the flight controller, but you have the flight controller in your hand and it's wired to the receiver, you can plug the flight controller in with USB, and that will, let me do that. That will give 5 volts to your receiver. Okay, so now I didn't want to do that. Turn the radio off. Okay, the radio doesn't like to be turned off when it's connected, so.
Receiver still connected.
Come on, turn off. All right, let me turn off the standby. Okay, the transmitter's off. Now I'm going to power up the receiver. So assume you have a brand new receiver with no passphrase, etc., and we're going to upgrade it. So the receiver, ignore the flight controller beeping, that's a separate video. The receiver, when I first power it on, it's blinking slowly, which means it's waiting for the radio to connect to it. And after 60 seconds, by default, it will give up. So I'm sorry you have to wait 60 seconds. And when that happens, it will blink fast. And on this receiver, there's a little meander antenna. That's actually the Wi-Fi antenna. So once it starts blinking fast, it's actually going to create a Wi-Fi hotspot. And that's how we're going to upgrade the firmware. So let me look at my Wi-Fi networks. It's not blinking fast yet. Now it's blinking fast. Okay. So now if I look at let's go to the directions. Oh, it doesn't have the directions. Okay, so, I'm doing this out of order. So we're doing step 2 first. Power on your receiver. This is explaining how we can power it on. After, I think that's maybe 2 minutes, receiver light rings up. Connect to the ExpressLRS hotspot. So we're going to find the Wi-Fi network that is created there. We're going to connect. Password is ExpressLRS. And we're connected. Can't read this page. Oh, seriously? There it is. So this is actually the website of the controller, and we want to update it. And we want to select the firmware file. Well, we don't have one, so I unfortunately went too fast. So let's go backwards and go back to the regular internet and follow my own directions. I didn't follow my own directions. I did two first. So we need to do one first. We need to create that binary file with the passphrase. So to do that, we go to the ExpressLRS Configurator. It's the exact same process. We always want to have the same firmware version on the receiver and transmitter. And now we're going to use device category happy model 2.4 gigahertz. And device will be the happy model EP2 2.4 gigahertz RX receiver. We're going to flash it via Wi-Fi, so click that. The regulatory domain is the same. Binding phrase, again, okay, now you know my binding phrase. We're not going to invert the UART. The performance options we're going to leave alone. And we're going to flash. So before I do that, let's look at the directions. So these were all the parameters that I just walked you through. Click Build. Okay. So in the configurator, Build. I'm not flashing it because we're just building the binary. And again, this has to be connected to the internet because now it's downloading the code from GitHub and creating the binary by compiling it with your custom passphrase. So this is the this is the firmware.bin. Okay, let's put that on the desktop. And that's the file we're going to need. So it's successful. So now I did one first. Now I can go back to 2, power on the receiver, which we did, and connect to the receiver Wi-Fi. ExpressLRS, connect. Now it's going to go to 10.1.1, which is our receiver. And you can change the binding phrase later and all the parameters on your receiver with the website, which is nice. But right now we just want to update the firmware. Select the firmware file that we just created. That's on the desktop. Firmware.bin. Open. And it's going to upload that to the receiver. Success. Great. All right. So we did that. Now the receiver and the transmitter have the latest firmware, and the receiver and the transmitter have the same binding phrase, so they should bind. So how do we know? Well, I'm going to turn everything off and then turn it on again, and it should bind. And if it's bound, then the green light on the receiver will be solid green. So you'll always know if your drone is connected to the radio by looking at the receiver. If it's solid green, it's connected. Let's turn on the radio.
Hey Peter, welcome back. Disarmed. Stabilize mode.
In my experience, it's better to turn the radio on first before the receiver. Now, I'm going to power on the receiver. By plugging the flight controller into the USB, which powers the flight controller, which then powers the receiver because it's connected to the flight controller. And sure enough, there's a green solid light. Now, the other nice thing is that the radio will tell you telemetry connected, telemetry disconnected. If it gets disconnected, it'll actually call out disconnected. So that's a nice feature of EdgeTX in this radio ecosystem. So what we've done so far, we have the radio internal module and the UI updated to the latest firmware. We have the receiver updated to the latest firmware. Both have the same passphrase, therefore they're both connected. And we don't have to do anything else to connect them.